Welcome, everybody. I'm joined by Scott Church of Category 1 Games to talk about the state of the CCG, TCG, it's the same damn thing, market and what's going on. We're going to talk the revival of some dead CCGs, the existence of some popular IP that is maybe not doing so well in the CCG market. See Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited, what's going on with Magic, what's going on just kind of market-wide. So, Scott, welcome back, man. I'm always envious of your shelves. I don't have the skills to put up shelves like that. Like, I don't know, not good with hammer.
My wife is great. She actually put these in for me. I just filled them with Transformers and cool stuff. So that was my job in the part of it. Thanks for having me on, Matt. Hey everybody, how's it? I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your this time of year, and hope you're enjoying your gaming that you're doing. So
Yeah, I think we're figuring out what is the new normal in the CCG space right now. So what does a space that has Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, Flesh and Blood, like what does it look like with all these new contenders, right? And so in the last 2 years, you've seen the launch of major IP-driven CCGs that have immense appeal to collectors, players. That frankly, both Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited are like pretty solid games, and then you also get the influx of sort of new Kickstarter games there. So it's a pretty crowded marketplace. And I think earlier in the year, Andy and I dubbed this the sort of golden age for CCGs. It's kind of checking in now, like what's going on, and is good IP the sort of golden ticket to success? And I don't know if it is anymore. I think people are not as into these things that they were when they first came out. And so maybe that's a good way to start this discussion with Star Wars Unlimited, Lorcana. Star Wars Unlimited just had set 3. Lorcana just had set 6, I think, is close to coming out. I mean, that's a breakneck speed they're going at. That's their own pacing issue that I think they're having. But I think both of these are struggling at a retail level. And what does that mean for the long-term health of these games if they're struggling at a retail level? What does it mean when retailers don't want to carry it and suddenly walk in with your kid to buy some Lorcana, and they said we stopped carrying Lorcana because it's not worth the shelf space? And then you just realize it's disappeared, and suddenly it becomes like Final Fantasy TCG, where the only place you can buy it is in random groups in eBay, and no one plays it, but it's still technically alive. And then more and more product comes out, and it's just you're drowning in Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. So I don't know. I think they're both at really interesting spaces where both are like fundamentally pretty good games that have benefited from the years of sort of figuring out how to make the perfect Magic clone, right? And that's what both of them kind of fundamentally are. I think Star Wars Unlimited is a little more diverse than Lorcana in that sense, but in general, like we've just spent 20 years figuring out this is how you do the Magic clone. Lorcana, I think, is a pretty good Magic clone. And I think, why do you think, Scott, that these two games are struggling at a retail level?
Man, we did a video a while ago about all the things that have to go right in order for a game to make it. And I think if you look back at that video, you can see some of the things that both Lorcana and SWU are dealing with right now. And a lot of it is to deal with interest to start, more interest than expected to start, that those companies could handle, under delivering on a second set that wasn't very good, a third set for Lorcana that was terrible, but also printed really heavily. Star Wars Unlimited overprinted the third set compared to demand, and now you see retailers just bailing on it and losing 15% on it, if not more, from what they paid. So, if you're a retailer and you have a game that spurns you basically a few times, you're probably not going to carry it anymore if it's going to be a money loser for you. Or you're going to carry it in very small supply. You're not going to support it in store, and you lose your player base for it because it's not paying the rent. And stores need to make money in order to provide that service for you. And if they're not making money from it, they can't survive, and they're not going to carry it. And they're going to turn to the games that they can survive with. Lorcana is in an interesting space. Did it bring in enough new people for the problems that Ravensburger created to start off? What I mean by that is you had to have, to be able to sell Lorcana, they wanted you to carry like 2 items that were outside of the game space. It's like you had to carry like D&D and some other product. They didn't want it just to be in hobby game stores only, like where it's just kind of like, someone's, extension of their house. So it was like really interesting how Lorcana, Ravensburger and Lorcana were set up to start. They kind of were rude to retailers in that sense and kind of expected more from them. And now the retailers are looking at them being like, we're not getting anything from you. Why should we bow down to your system anymore? And so when you're like that to start off and you don't have a product that's successful long term, they're going to drop you. And so you're seeing that with these two games where the interest is waning. There's not a collectability factor that's bringing in collectors. You have to have something that makes these games collectible. And with this new Star Wars set, where the highest price card, or like the third highest price card, is $20, and everything else is less than that, what's going on there?
It kind of goes back to this idea that I've kicked around for a while that I call like the TCG stool. I've seen it, other people talk about it, like where basically you have three legs of the stool, right? Players are their most fundamental part of that, right? And the singles market is going to feed the players. And then you also have collectors, right? You have people that want foils, hyperspace, cold foil treatment, whatever, enchanted. And then you also have this third leg that people hate on a little bit, which is investors. There are people that think if you buy this stuff and keep it in a closet, then it's going to increase in value. And you can laugh at those people, but those people are laughing all the way to the bank with the Lord of the Rings Magic set. Like the Lord of the Rings collector boosters are bonkers. Like I remember buying 2 of those and I was hesitant to buy them. This is like November a year ago. And there are 2. I got 2 collector boosters of the weird special collector edition, and they're $295. I'm like, oh, this is a lot. Those things are selling for $1,000 each. So those people that like did that, you can call them speculators, but they're like, hey, this is solid IP. Everyone loves Lord of the Rings. There's a bunch of cool stuff in here. I like the game, but that is needed to have product move ultimately, and whether it's moving into the hands of players, into the binders of collectors, or into the closets of these investors, if you will. Like you need to have that green leg for a game to have like long-term viability. And I think right now the legs, all 3 of those legs are kind of falling a little bit. Like Lorcana had the Disney investor people, like, hey, I just want first edition. I'm going to stick this in the closet, and I promise someday this first edition box of this will be worth something. And that might have been true for the first set of Lorcana, but by set 2, 3, 4, it's just there's a bajillion copies of it. There's a bajillion. It's everywhere, and I also think scalpers ruined this market a little bit, and they're going to be everywhere. I don't know what to say about it. There's also a key distinction between resellers and scalpers. There's one thing about buying stuff with the intent of playing, as well as kind of helping stock singles, as to compare it to like clearing out a target and having like a brawl in aisle 4 over like Rise of the Floodborn, packs that you're trying to sell on Facebook, right? Like I think that's a distinct difference. But yeah, both those games I think are in interesting places, and I think Lorcana is in a bit more dire of a place. I am seeing it less in game stores. I'm not seeing the big, posters up. And the other thing I think is Magic has kind of come back fighting, right? I think a lot of people a year and a half ago, before the Lord of the Rings stuff came out, were kind of like, Magic is just lagging. They had some bad sets in 2023, and then people were kind of like, the internet was souring on the idea of the expanded universe stuff. And now people are like, yeah, give me Final Fantasy, baby, please. Like, give me, Marvel Secret Layers selling out at midnight kind of stuff. Like, we might hate this on the message board, but secretly we're all like buying this stuff.
Right. Well, and Magic's become more of a pick and choose. It's almost like a buffet of what you want to pick up, right? So, like, I haven't played Magic. The last set I went to a pre-release on was Amonkhet. I love the Egyptian theme. I was hoping that set would be great. But I'm hugely excited for Final Fantasy, and I'll go to a pre-release and I'll play in it when I haven't played in Magic in forever, and I'll probably buy stuff to hold myself because I enjoy it, and I'll sell extras on my site. So, but I'm not doing that with most Magic sets. Whereas Star Wars Unlimited, I loved the first set. It was great. It brought so many people back into playing that haven't been in card stores in 20 years. Lorcana brought people into game stores that hadn't ever played card games before. Was their experience good where they want to come back? Are game stores even set up to handle new customers that have never played games like this before and introduce them to the ecosystem, get them used to buying packs, get them used to, hey, every 3 months there's going to be a new set. Can you handle that? No, I just want to enjoy this game because I love Disney. Okay, well, this probably isn't for you. Find other things more Disney related. Like, so are these stores, capable of handling this? Can they transition people that are coming back, in Star Wars to, playing other games, or are they only going to be there for Star Wars and then they're gone when Star Wars isn't interesting? Like, what is that transition? And you saw it with Pokemon back in the 90s, where once that came out, a lot of those kids that played Pokemon joined in on all the other, TCGs around that time, and they became regulars in game stores, and then are adults now still buying it. And are we going to see that from Star Wars Unlimited and Lorcana? I don't know, and it will be really interesting to see. The other thing with Star Wars Unlimited, and same thing with Lorcana, is there was a short supply of these earlier sets for like set 1, but now there's a supply hitting the market right now with Star Wars Unlimited, the first set. And once that hits, what's that going to do to singles prices? Like, Luke right now is one of the more expensive cards that people want, and it's going to drop that price once there's more product on the market and people can open.
Yeah, sorry, we're just getting a little bit of static. Can you just hold your mic?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. So are we going to see issues with pricing dropping even more for singles as sealed product enters more and more into the market and it's not as hard to find? For me personally, I saw Star Wars Unlimited. We sold out of a lot of our early stuff. We sold it at reasonable prices before it spiked. And I then actually dropped our prices fairly below market at that time just to move them, because I figured once that resupply hits, it's going to lower prices even more. And we're seeing that more and more. And I stayed away from cracking the second set and even doing anything with the third set because I saw this really being a problem. And so I'll carry singles. I've had people like excited about the game. I don't want to take away from anyone's excitement. I think it's a great game. If you're loving it, keep playing it. If you're enjoying the game aspect of it, keep playing it. I don't want to take away from anything happening with the game. I just look at the retail side and what's happening and the market, and it's not in a good place from a seller's perspective. Another thing you'll see is I walked into a local store where they had, I want to say Ursula's Revenge or whatever that set is. It's a third or fourth. I think it's a fourth set for Lorcana, and the local store had it for $180 a box at release. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, $180 a box, who's buying that? And I think stores have to be realistic that, yeah, it was a hot product, but it's no longer something you can keep above MSRP. You should probably be putting it at MSRP at this point.
Yeah.
And those are type of games too, where if you do a convention and the regular person's walking by, or the kid's going to look at it and say, oh, Lorcana, I want that. Or are they going to look and see Pokemon? I want that. All these younger kids know Pokemon. They pick that up where they're at. They're not picking up Lorcana. And I think that's what you have to learn, how to get that kid market and get them buying it, that then gets parents' wallets out. And I don't think Lorcana has hit that aspect yet.
I think this isn't meant to be like conspiratorial at all here, but I think both Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited, which are Disney properties, both Disney properties, I feel like the cards, and part of this is a result of having to print 200 odd cards in a set, but I opened set 2 of Star Wars Unlimited. I'm like, who the heck are these guys? Right? It's like, this was the protagonist in the movie Solo, which 16 people watched, right?
Yeah.
And like, they're just not like playing the hits, right? They're like, this is Jason Voss. I'm like, who is, like, I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan. I feel like I didn't know who half the people in the sets were. And Twilight of the Republic, I'm a really big fan of like episode 1. And even there, I'm like, who was this, like Senator Palpatine's assistant, like, and that's part, I know you have to print 200 cards and like, you can't find 200 different personalities, but there's a little bit of this like movement towards obscure, like playing up IP that might have not been super popular with people, maybe to like promote, oh, you didn't know that Kierlin Boba or whatever. Like, I was like, who are all these Mandalorians? Like, most people have not seen Rebels or Clone Wars, and they don't know about Pre-Vizsla and his quest for the Darksaber, and it just feels like they didn't have the same like narrative arc appeal that something like the first set had, which was like pretty broad. It's like, this is all the characters from the coolest era, and said like, let's go to like a really obscure that's like mostly from the cartoons, which are actually very good, right? But it didn't have this like strong narrative arc. And I think same with Lorcana, like I opened up some of set 3 or 4, I can't remember. I was like, who the heck are these guys? Right? Like these are not like Disney characters I know. Like give me like Yago and Aladdin or something instead of like this grab bag of like tier 3 movies that maybe there's like a long-term IP interest from Disney executives to like, oh yeah, that's the third most popular character from the Frozen spinoff or whatever. I don't even know. Like it just, I had to ask people, I'm like, who is that? Like, oh, I don't know. I think maybe from the Atlantis movie. Like, oh, there's an
Yeah.
Atlantis movie.
Well, you kind of wonder, like, if you could see the streaming numbers, do any of these new sets come out and then people go and watch any of these random movies that these are from, right? Like, it's like, if you're a musician, are you going to release your B and C sides onto your, release? And that's what I feel like sometimes these game sets do, is they don't realize you got to play the hits. I remember when Marvel Verse System was out and they released a Midnight Sunset as set 3 and I'm like, how are you doing a Midnight Sunset over X-Men or Fantastic Four or Avengers? Why are you putting your D-level characters at the time as a third set release? You got to wait and do that when you're like far on in the game. And why these game companies don't do that and play the hits that are going to sell for them is beyond me. Like I'm a marketing person. Like, talk to your marketing people. What sells? It's not going to be the guy that's like Clone Rebel 1. Like, no, like, hit me up with, who do I know? I know Darth Maul. I know, Jango Fett. I know, like, hit up your hits. Don't hit up your D tier characters.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also, if you look at maybe the way games have gone, they've gone a bit more character driven. Like there's more like characters, because ultimately that's what people like to see. That you open a pack of Star Wars CCG at its premiere and it's all these red cards. Like,
Right.
what did I open? So there's this pressure to put more characters out there that I think is also like having a dig deep into the bag of personalities. But I feel like you could just have like a Biggs and a Wedge, right? Instead of like, this was Luke's one of the kids from the pod racing scene, right? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to transition a little bit to talking about some upcoming stuff. So, Star Wars Unlimited, Lorcana, interesting puzzle piece to figure out where they fit. I think everybody didn't think Magic would be doing as good as it is now, and I think that is also on those markets that they thought they were going to be able to fill. And people are like, actually, I'm pretty happy with Magic because there's, like you said, a buffet. But we also see this kind of return of some old IPs, some dead CCGs. I think the list is longer than I thought. You have Overpower, you have Warlord, you have Imagination, you have Animeum. Like these are all games where I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with where they existed, and they're not stellar IP. Like they're not well-known IPs, right? But some of them
Right.
are, fan created, and it's like interesting to see. Warlord's the most interesting. Like that seems like a really robust campaign.
Yeah,
And
Warlord will do really well, I think. Overpower has had a strong presence. They've been going to cons and conventions, and they've knocked it out of the park. They've got the license to, like, the world of John Carter, Warlord of Mars, Tarzan, Rice Edward Burroughs. It's his world of characters, and they've also got Top Cow Comics, which does like Witchblade and the Darkness. Cyberforce, it's Mark Silvestri's line within Image Comics. They're trying to work with other Image comic creators to get their line. So they're trying to bring back Overpower to a certain way they had the game in the 90s, and they're doing a really good job with it. You've got Magi Nation that had a Kickstarter. I didn't follow that one as closely. I think I had said Animeum before. I meant Magi Nation, so I apologize for that. And but you see games that have come back and been successful. You saw that with Vampire the Masquerade, where they've got a company that's fully supporting it and doing print on demand for starters, and they're putting out new releases. You see games like Doomtown that came back as a living card game, and it kind of failed initially, and I think they brought it back as a second living card game. And from what I understand, it's actually doing really well. And you see that same thing with the Legends of Five Rings living card game that came back for a little while. Netrunner came back for a little while as a living card game. Some of those are successful, some of them not as successful. So you're seeing these Kickstarters coming along, and it'll be interesting to see, what the retail, if any retail stores pick them up and pull them into their stores. Like, would Warlord be sold in stores? Will Overpower? It'll be interesting to see. And then, how do they do sets afterwards? Will be really fascinating. I'm excited for it. I backed Warlord pretty heavily. I'll probably back Overpower here pretty heavily. I didn't do Machination, and I probably should have. And so it's kind of like interesting to see. Like, I'll be curious to see what these games look like as they're back in print.
This is just a thought I have about Kickstarter stuff. It's also just struggle. It's a struggle for me to back stuff on Kickstarter when you know in your head it's going to be minimum 9 months over that expected delivery date.
Yeah,
Nothing on Kickstarter runs on a schedule that is realistic.
it's so true.
I remember backing Frosthaven in 2020, and it was like going to be delivered 2021. It was like delivered like 18 months late or something, or maybe it was 12 months late. And by then I was like, I forgot that I dropped $200 in this Kickstarter 2.5 years ago. And so I don't know. I think Kickstarter, I think, is a great model, but there's not always realistic timelines there. I think one thing that I've been thinking about a little bit is what is the definition of success, right? Is success that you're still printing it today, or success that you like Netrunner as a living card game? I think it's really cool, and like it had a few sets. I can't remember, 3 or 4, and like I view that product not as a failure because it's not still in print, but it's like a nice experience that you can play, and like that is a successful product that not everything needs to continue to be printed to be considered a success. Like you can just say like this was a project, like it's like a show, right? Like, did The Walking Dead need 12 seasons? Or maybe it would have been better to just have 5. I'm like, we're really happy we produced 5 great seasons, and that was a success for us. And maybe putting out 12 kind of diluted some of the other seasons where people forgot the iconic moments and characters, and maybe even hurt the IP long term because other spin-off stuff now feels diluted as well. Whatever, Fear of the Walking Dead, Daryl's Adventures, whatever. I don't even know. Like I used to be really into that, and then now I'm like, there's too much crap.
Yeah,
I can't follow it all.
right.
Anyway, I think that like by trying to make success mean it's ongoing always, you kind of have this like it can go one way where it's like The Simpsons, where it's like, oh, The Simpsons is still on. Okay, that's cool. I appreciate it. Or it can kind of go into that like dragged out. I can't believe they're doing another season. Who wanted this?
Right.
I don't know if The Office is in this category, but you kind of get into, and so I think the only ones that are immune to this are sort of the big 3, right? Where like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Magic, everyone's going to want more sets because we're bought in. And I think with some of these newcomers, like you might just see this being something where there's 7 sets that come out. And I think we've discussed on here before, you have 3 years to beat the big 3, right? And Lorcana's going to be entering year 3 next year. I mean, it'll be like early into year 3, but Lorcana has to turn stuff around from a retail standpoint. A year ago, or a year from now, rather, they really need to be in a different position than they are now. And Star Wars Unlimited, I think, still has a lot of real estate ahead of it, or a runway rather, but it's just some things need to gel better. And one set isn't a failure. It's not a death knell or anything, but it can be a harbinger of things to come. And I think being kind of aware of that, and also managing expectations that maybe it's okay if Lorcana doesn't have 48 sets by 2030 or something, right?
Right. Well, and something I think more game companies need to look at is what is the average age of your player and competitor in the game, right? Buyer. So your customer. So I look at like Star Wars Unlimited. Are these mainly 40-year-old men playing, or is this getting more of a teenage audience? And if you've got more of a 40-year-old men audience, maybe slow down your set release to maybe like 2 to 3 a year instead of on the quarterly basis, right? Like, do you have time? Do most 40-year-olds have time to update decks and stay competitive and do this and that? Or are they like, hey, I've got other commitments and I don't have as much time to put into that, but if you give me a set every few months, that's exciting for me to go to. It's a look forward to moment. I'll go, I'll play in it, I'll be excited for it, and then I'll be excited for the next one. But if you put it out too often, too much, it overloads the system. I think Lorcana is kind of in that space. And I look at a game like Grand Archive that I don't think they're releasing their schedule is pretty slow on releases. Same thing with like even Final Fantasy TCG, which I mean it's crazy to think that's on set like 24, 25, but they've I don't think their releases are all that often. Maybe they're quarterly, but it doesn't feel like it to me. But I'm like, if you slow down your releases, I think if your audience is older and more mature and they're going to dump a decent amount into it when it first comes out, don't do the we're going to pump so much out, you choose which one you want to do, like Magic. If you're a newer game, look at your audience, figure out, hey, maybe a slow release is actually best and we'll get the most dollar from them at that point versus just pushing them too hard and then they just bail on us.
I think you're making a very good point here. I think the issue is that companies ultimately, we're in a hyper capitalistic society. It is what it is, and then they're going to be like looking at like their chance to make money is by selling product, and they should release more product, even if that dilutes the ecosystem. They can look at something like Magic. Like Magic had 6 sets this year. What we could do that as well. It's like, but Magic is Magic, and they've created enough product over the years and enough formats as well. That's the other thing.
Right.
I mean, how many Magic formats are there when you stop and like add in some of these other ones, Highlander, Oathbreaker? Like you could really get into like some pretty gnarly Magic formats, right? And that's something that both Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited don't have. Like I know Star Wars Unlimited has this Twin Suns format that I think could take off, but they don't really have the card pool for it. And maybe that's the reason they want to release more cards. But I think there's other sort of alternative products that could be interesting, whether it's collector boosters or something to spur up that interest a little bit. Jump starts are popular, or just I don't know. I'm not trying to like add into the glut of more product, but right now it just feels like Lorcana in particular is kind of flat. And I'm interested to see how these other games, as they come and eat into this a little bit. I don't think they're going to like knock out Lorcana by any means, but it's just a death by 1,000 cuts. It's someone that actually finds playing. What's the one that had won? Sorcery, is that one?
Right.
It's just a better experience, or there's a better team. I also think that these kind of upstarts are doing, like the Warlord guys are like really doing a the guerrilla campaign here. Like they're out there, they're talking to people. They're engaging with community. I mean, they've reached out to me. I'm like a nobody, right? And like they reached out to me. I was like, wow, like I reached out to a nobody on YouTube. And so, anyways, I think there's just like a hungriness there that is going to go farther than like maybe the big bureaucracy of Final Fantasy Flight Games. That's just like or Ravensburger. That's we got to run this through. We got our Disney overlords. They say that Chewbacca can't look like this. He needs to look like this. Because of their IP concerns. And so it's almost like the fancier IP is a bit of an albatross on your neck, right? Where you're worried about portraying Luke in a certain way because Disney design team person says, no, he looks too whatever. And, when you have your own IP, you can just do whatever you want. Right? You can make your Warlord look. I don't actually. Warlord, I think, is invented. Was it a comic book before? Or?
No, I think it was a fully unique property. I mean, going off of what you're saying, like the Sorcerer game, people love that game. There's not a lot of product out for it. I think there's only like 1 or 2 sets.
The second set might be coming out, maybe.
And I think like one of the things with that, and I said about slowing things down, I think they've done a good job with that. But the downfall of slowing it down is the game can get stagnant if there's not new product in, like refreshing it. One of the things I really liked about the Cypher's era of games was they would release those enhanced sets and add like 5 to 20 new cards into the market. And so if you had like a delay in releases, we're still putting a few new products out that get people to buy. And it actually shakes up the market with these like kind of overpowered cards that you have to buy in order to keep playing. And I think that's almost a better way of doing it, is putting out little pieces here and there that get people to still buy, but it's not, and it shakes up the market, but you can then delay how long between actual releases happen. I think that's like an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think as well, maybe making the sets feel a little tighter. And that's one thing I really like about set 1 of Star Wars Unlimited, is it felt like a pretty tight set where I'm like, there are use cases for a lot of these cards. It's very fun to draft. Set 2 was, it's like there's 10 good cards. And the rest are just chaff, right?
Yeah.
I can't speak too much of Lorcana. I've only played, maybe a couple dozen times, so I'm not an expert. But it feels like there's a lot of chaff in that, and that the rares are the valuable cards, and everyone's chasing 12 cards, and
Right.
that's, I don't know, just not a way to run something long term. Um, any kind of final thoughts as we wrap up here? I think we're at a really interesting inflection point where the next year. I mean, the other thing we didn't even talk about is sort of the election years tend to be bad for retail. We've obviously gotten through that phase, and I think we're starting to see spending going up a little bit because people were saving for one outcome or the other outcome, and now you see kind of this almost revenge spending happening. So you see more money entering the economy. But going back to our original question, what is the new normal? What is the new normal going to look like when you have 6 CCGs in a store rather than 3 or 2? Like, I mean, I don't know, from basically like 2009 to 2022, it was Magic and Pokemon in every local game store. And now it could be Magic, Pokemon, Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited. Maybe they stock one of the more indie games. Probably not. Maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! So you could have 6 games, and that's just a lot of product. It's a lot of inventory. It's a lot of like markets to know if you're selling singles, right? It's easy to like learn one market, but like learning, oh crap, now I need to know like overwhelming barrage is a valuable uncommon from Star Wars Unlimited. I need to like remember that's the one good uncommon. It's just like too much information, almost like a cognitive overload that people in stores can't handle that amount of information. I know I'm talking to a guy who has 180 different games on his shop, so it's like no sympathy there. But
well, one thing, Matt, with all of that too is these stores are a lot of times bound by who their distributors are. So there's 4 main distributors kind of in the hobby gaming space, and usually stores use 1 or 2 of them mainly as their main distributor. And then some of these distributors have rights to games that other distributors don't have. And they have exclusivity to it. And so games like Lorcana, I think, is opening up to more distributors. Same thing with Star Wars Unlimited. I think One Piece has been limited to only 1 distributor and is then going to more of them. So that's a factor as well, where, what distributors does your game store use? Do they use ACD, Southern, GTS? Like, depending on that, depends on what they can get. And then that opening up to more will open up more games to be had, and probably at lower prices, because as more distributors have it, that means there's more fighting on price and discounts and different things that distributors want to clear out extra product. So I think more games will see a discount as more distributors get into it and more stores can have it. But what's the health long term? How many stores are actually going to carry singles for their 5th tier game versus their 1st and 2nd tier game that takes up the majority of their time? So I think you're going to continue to see stores that will special order stuff for players, but not always carry it. I think, like we said, sorcery, how many stores are actually carrying that versus like, hey, that's cool that we got 1 box in and it's sold. And how many stores are actually going to pick up these Kickstarters and kick some of their higher known properties down a level? So that's where these Kickstarters have a real challenge, is how did they get into stores when retail shelf space is very scarce and they have to be hitting X numbers to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think as well that maybe the hypothesis that Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited were bringing new folks in, like growing the pie, if you will, was perhaps a little flawed. I think that they have grown the pie a bit, but I also think that a lot of those people were excited about first releases, excited about kind of the hype around things, and then they discovered this rather ruthless cycle of 3 months there's a new product to buy, and they just left. Right? Yeah. They were there for 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is out. They're doing spoilers for 7. Right? It's just too much for the average non. I don't know. Like we are totally.
Lifer.
Yeah, like we've been doing this for a long time. Like, oh yeah, so the preview season and then spoilers, and then okay, pre-release. And I think that was just like a lot. And you got to grow this pie carefully with people that are going to be interested long term, or people that feel like it can be more like a buffet and you can be a little more selective. Pokemon's also a buffet, right? And no one really plays Pokemon. Come at me in the comments if you disagree. But I just think that it grew the pie for like 3 months, and then people left. And I'm not saying it can't re-energize again or change. I think that there's a lot of space to be creative. You have really cool IP to work with, but it generally feels like we're all competing. Like I say, like I'm a game. There's a competition for the same pool of people that is not actually growing very much. It might be contracting because you have things like board games being more sophisticated. Video games are always going to eat into this. So it's like, how do you get people to care about cards?
Yeah. And you're not seeing a big, there's a while there where board games were all the talk. Most hobby game stores, it was like board game, board game, board game. Here's a new one. Here's Gloomhaven. Here's this. I don't think there's been a new board game for a little while that's really impacted taking your CCG gamers out of that market to do the board game. So I think that's helped grow it. I think we talked before about Magic is doing really well right now. And so it's kind of high tide is raising all ships to a certain degree. And then once low tide hits, who's going to still be in the harbor? And it's going to be Magic, Pokemon, probably Yu-Gi-Oh! And do any of these other games make it through that low tide?
Yeah. I will just end this with kind of a final prediction here. I think 2025 is going to be a good year for this market. You might see some games wash out, and that doesn't mean it's bad, right? But I think that spending is going to increase a little bit. I think more people are going to be just, perhaps like spending rather than taking the big vacation, they're going to take the little vacation. They're going to treat themselves to their personal hobbies. If we go through a mini recession or the economy's booming, one way or the other, like I think people will still want to do something that brings them joy. And I think right now there's a lot of uncertainty with kind of elections, direction of the world, all these products. But I think that a lot of that is just done now, and people are going to continue on with their lives, and they're going to continue on with their hobbies. And I think Magic is going to have a really good year next year. I think Pokemon will follow, and we'll see what happens with Star Wars and Lorcana.
Yeah, the current Pokemon Pikachu set shot up in value. I mean, it started out once boxes hit above 120, 125, it's pretty crazy, and it's doing great. The next set is an Eevee set. It's going to do really well. So Pokemon's in a really good space. I think Magic, what they've announced, looks really exciting overall this next year. I totally agree with you. I think 2025 is going to be a great year for gaming and just kind of enjoying these hobbies. And hopefully we can kind of get back to, enjoying it versus like so worried about like the economy aspect of it. And, hopefully these other games like Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited kind of figure it out and adjust and make it a fun environment for the players. I think that's the biggest thing is, are you having fun gaming and doing this? And keep doing it if you're having fun. I mean, that's the big thing to me. So
yeah, final thought there. 2025 is also a year where you're like out of cycle for next generation consoles. This is just a final like throwaway thought, but you had the PS5 release in 2020, I believe, November 2020.
yeah.
And then, obviously like there's a lot of hype around getting it and buying it and spending money on it and, acquiring it. And now I think you're not going to have a console until 2026. And so people aren't going to be saving for that next gen console. They're just going to be kind of like, I have a PS5 or whatever, Xbox, whatever they're called, 360.
I think Switch has a new console next year. It's going to be a new Switch in 25.
It's interesting how that they broke out of the cycle, because I feel like usually Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo for so long have been like locked in almost like a 6-month period. But like, oh yeah, all the new consoles are coming out. People are about to spend $1,000, if you're into gaming, right? And that means $1,000 won't be spent on other stuff because you're getting the next generation of console for a large number of gamers.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, that's a final kind of throwaway thought, how that might impact stuff. But I think the next gen for Sony and Microsoft isn't until 2026, 2027, maybe.
I think it's 27 for them. I think the Switch they're saying that Switch sales right now are tanking because everybody's just waiting for the next one that'll be out next year. So look for Switch to be on discount here pretty soon as the new one comes out within the next year.
According to a quick Google search that was generated by AI, it says late 2026 or to 2028. So 2027 might be, I don't know, losing track of time here. But that's all the time we have for today. Scott, thanks for hanging out, man. This is always a pleasure to do this stuff. Like, subscribe, check out Scott's store, all of that. And we will catch you guys later.